Order, order. John Lamont to move the motion.
Thank you, Marcus. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair. I beg to move that this House has considered E-petition 734311 relating to the public being given a right to a vote of no confidence. I want to start by thanking the more than 120,000 people across the United Kingdom who have signed this petition securing today's debate. I would also like to thank some of the organisations I've met during this process, including Unlock Democracy and their Chief Executive, a former member of this House, Tom Brake, alongside the Hansard Society and the Electoral Reform Society, who are universally recognised as independent and non-partisan authorities on this area. Now, whatever members' views on the proposal itself, the fact that so many people have taken the time to sign this petition demands that it is treated with seriousness and respect. This petition calls for the introduction of a mechanism that would allow the public to remove a government that no longer commands public support. The petitioner states that we voted for a party based on promises made before the general election, yet we feel none have been delivered. In fact, the opposite has happened. I could not have put it better myself. Whatever we have seen since the election from this Prime Minister is nothing but chaos. This government is making bad decisions. It is damaging our economy. It is crushing businesses. It is driving unemployment up. It is piling on debt. It is giving away sovereign territory. It is allowing our veterans to be dragged through the courts. That it's because the Prime Minister came to office with no plan for our country. There have now been at least 15 major U-turns from this Labour government, hiking taxes on working people despite promises before the election not to do so. Pensioners left freezing in their homes last winter because of the government's cruel cuts to winter fuel payments. The family farm tax, the refusal for so many months to hold a grooming gangs inquiry, welfare reforms scrapped, digital ID, waspy women left betrayed. The list goes on and on, Mrs Barker.
I wonder if you give way on that point.
Happily give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. And this is a really important issue, unquestionably, and it is indicative of the unhappiness of the public with this government in particular. But does he agree with me that one of the great difficulties with this government is the number of manifesto pledges that have been broken, things that have been introduced that weren't in the manifesto, and the constant U-turning would spin your head?
My honourable friend makes an excellent point. I think that goes to the nub of the motivation for this petition. It's not so much, I think, the desire for constitutional change. It's a desire and the feeling of feeling let down by this government. A government that promised change but has delivered none of the change, and all the promises they did make have been abandoned. They've tried to bring forward other measures which were nowhere near the manifesto at the time of the election. Now, Mrs Barker, the Prime Minister promised the highest possible standards. In his own words, he said, a government of service. Yet all we have seen is scandal and chaos. Peter Mandelson appointed US ambassador despite his links to a notorious paedophile. A comms chief appointed to the House of Lords despite his links to another paedophile. A deputy Prime Minister caught evading tax. A homelessness minister who resigned after making her tenants homeless. And a Cabinet Office Minister just this weekend forced to quit after it was discovered he had hired a firm to gather information on journalists to discredit them. And there have been many others, too many to mention today. Now, the reason people are signing this petition is that they are fed up. Fed up with the chaos, fed up with the U-turns, and fed up with this Prime Minister. Now, I want to turn to the proposal put forward by the petitioners. Members of Parliament of whatever party serve at the pleasure of the British people. It is their right to elect us, and it is their right to remove us at an election too. There are many questions as to how the petitioner's proposal would work in practice. Would the proposal mean a new general election with the public going back to the polls? Or could it mean the formation of a new government and a new Prime Minister from within the current House of Commons? There's also the significant question of the defined and national threshold. It would be easy for a well-organised, well-funded campaign group to remove a government of any political party should the threshold be set too low. Would the threshold of 10% of the British public, the same threshold as for recall petitions for members of Parliament today? Or should it perhaps be 50% or perhaps a higher percentage than the incumbent government secured at the last general election. Whatever that number, it would have to be high enough to demonstrate a genuine national consensus. Over what period would the signatures need to be gathered, and how would they be verified to ensure democratic legitimacy and prevent foreign state actors from interfering politically? There is also the question of frequency. If a petition succeeded once, could another one be launched shortly thereafter? There are also important questions that would need to be answered for such a profound constitutional change. However, none of these practical concerns should blind us to the message being sent by the people who signed this petition. Mrs Barker, less than 2 months ago, I moved a debate in this chamber, again on behalf of the Petitions Committee, after more than 3 million people signed a petition calling for a general election. People are deeply angry about the performance of this government. They feel unheard. They are sick and tired of the constant mistakes being made by the Prime Minister and his ministers almost every day. Rather than Labour MPs focusing on making our country better, it seems their energies are being consumed by leadership speculation and political survival. Of course, the easiest way to remove this government almost immediately would be through a vote of no confidence in the House of Commons by MPs. Having the confidence of the House of Commons is central to any government's authority. Governments that lose a confidence vote in the past have either resigned in favour of an alternative government, or the Prime Minister has requested a dissolution from the monarch, triggering a general election. But we don't necessarily need new legislation. Labour MPs know the message that their constituents are sending them. They know how deeply unpopular the Prime Minister is. They no longer want him to be in charge. As the Leader of the Opposition has said on several occasions, Labour MPs have an opportunity to join with the Conservatives and remove this failing Prime Minister from office by uniting on a vote of no confidence, because that is what would be in the best interests of this country. After all of Labour's pre-election promises, it is no wonder that people are feeling fed up. They feel utterly betrayed. That's why it is important that today members across the chamber listen to the message that the petitioners are sending. The Prime Minister and this government have run out of road. The sooner we see the back of them, it will be the better for our country. Thank you, Mrs Barker.
The question is that this House has considered E-petition 734311 relating to the public being given a right to a vote of no confidence. I call Lib Dem spokesperson Sarah Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Ms Barker, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And I thank the Petitions Committee for this important debate, and to the 120,000 people across the country who signed the petition. I know from speaking to my own constituents, from Lynham to Corsham, that people feel frustrated, unheard and disappointed. People expect governments to keep promises and to deliver, even if they did not vote for the political party that assumes office, as the Honourable Member has mentioned. People are crying out for action on the cost of living, the NHS, not endless Westminster soap operas. Unfortunately, like his countless Conservative predecessors in years gone by, I have to agree with the Honourable Member that the Prime Minister seems distracted by his own survival, leaving the rest of us to pay the price. The question today is not simply about constitutional mechanisms, but about the feeling that this government is not delivering. Across the United Kingdom, families are struggling with the cost of living crisis. Access to the NHS, healthcare remains an uphill struggle. Businesses, particularly in rural areas like Wiltshire, are not being supported to grow. This petition is about a lack of trust. And the government's official response to this position and its ongoing failure to deliver does little to restore the faith of anyone who has asked us to be here today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Opposition spokesperson Mike Wood.
Thank you, Mrs Barker, and let me begin by also thanking the more than 120,000 people across the United Kingdom who have signed this petition that's led to today's debate, and also joining my honourable friend in acknowledging the many organisations that have engaged constructively with this issue, many of which have already been named: Unlock Democracy and its Chief Executive, our former member of this House, Tom Brake, the Hansard Society and the Electoral Reform Society and many others that have worked on an independent basis to review our constitutional arrangements. Now, members will clearly have different views on this proposal, varying with their views on the effectiveness of this government. But the number of signatures really does demand that we treat this petition with the utmost seriousness and respect. The petition understandably calls for a further mechanism that would allow the public to remove a government that no longer commands public confidence. My honourable friend read out an excerpt from their petition where they say that they feel that they have seen the opposite of what the government promised before the election. And of course, many people across the country, in all of our constituencies, will recognise that sentiment. The government does seem to have lurched from error to error, from crisis to crisis, and decisions that have been made have damaged the economy, they've undermined business, they've driven up unemployment, they've increased debt and left communities and public services struggling. But above all, I think they have really hit people's confidence in government, having been promised so much and seen so little delivered. Whether that's veterans being dragged through the courts or sovereign territory being conceded, the public can see that it is not getting what it expected. Indeed, it's not getting what the government said in some cases only months ago, before those 15 major U-turns. Commitments made before the election have been abandoned, whether the promise of no taxes on rising people, which had been broken, pensioners left struggling after winter fuel payments, and the many others that my honourable friend has raised in his opening speech. But I think the crux of this debate comes down to perhaps the biggest promise that the Prime Minister made before the election, the one where he pledged the highest standards in public life for government of service, but instead has delivered scandal after scandal, many of the government's own making. And just this weekend, we saw the Inquiries Minister having to resign after he was investigated by his own department. And so it really is no surprise to see members of the public signing petitions like this to try to regain an element of control from a government elected with such an enormous majority that is failing to deliver what is being promised. But whilst the public frustration is clear and understandable, we must look carefully at the proposal itself. We must be careful that any new mechanism must work in all circumstances. The previous government, of course, did introduce a recall mechanism for those members of Parliament who had been found guilty of certain either criminal offences or serious breaches of the standards of this House. It allowed their constituents to decide whether they wanted those members of Parliament to continue. And I'm not necessarily against looking at whether that principle can be expanded to a national level, but we'd have to think very carefully as to how that can be done. We certainly want our political systems to be more responsive to the electorate, but we need to be very careful how that can be done within a parliamentary rather than presidential election system, as exists in many of those countries that do have the ability for public to trigger elections or recall at a central level, because it is the electorate who choose us, and it is the electorate who remove each of us if they wish at a general election. And under our parliamentary system, a government holds office because it commands the confidence of this House, and that is a fundamental principle that our system and our democracy relies on, as the Cabinet Manual explicitly states. So government's authority flows from its ability to command the confidence of the elected House of Confidence. And so, as my honourable friend said in opening, that confidence can be tested at any time through a vote of confidence, or of course a vote of no confidence. And as the Leader of the Opposition has encouraged, that option is available for those members of Parliament whose constituents feel that we need to have a general election. I would urge all constituents who feel that way to make sure that their representatives in Parliament are aware of the strength of their feeling, because the conventions of parliamentary democracy have served us well, and introducing a direct recall mechanism for removing a government or for triggering a general election before the parliamentary term was due to expire would obviously raise significant practical and constitutional questions, some of which have already been highlighted, such as whether a successful public vote of no confidence would automatically trigger a general election or simply require a change of Prime Minister to form a new government within an existing Parliament, whether change in personnel would suffice. And as my honourable friends mentioned, what threshold would demonstrate genuine national support that would represent a need to, or would suggest that the government has irretrievably lost the confidence of the British people, rather than going through what might be temporary unpopularity at a time when it needs to make difficult but possibly necessary choices. Would that be at the level that had been set for recall petitions for individual MPs, where we've seen that threshold has tended to be very low, and in almost all cases, once a petition has been triggered, the threshold has been met? That would risk leading to some instability, or would we be looking at a higher threshold? Would we want 50% of those registered to vote? Would we want more voters than perhaps a government secured at the previous general election? Because, as has already been mentioned, if the threshold was too low, the risk is that well-funded groups could repeatedly attempt to destabilise any government of any political party, and of course the risk of that including perhaps outside actors with their own motives would be something that I think anybody would have to seriously consider before making constitutional changes of this significance. On a national level, how could we be confident that the signatures were verified? Obviously, where we have postal votes in a parliamentary or local council election, there is something to compare against. But unless we're requiring signatures alongside voter registrations, which would very much go against the direction that I know the government is setting out in this evening's legislation, then there would be unlikely to be any definitive database against which any signature on a petition could be compared. And how could we prevent petitions from being launched back-to-back, creating permanent instability? I mean, these are some of the questions that might be asked that I don't think are minor details. They really are fundamental before we should be looking at major constitutional change, because we have seen the consequences of poorly considered constitutional reform in the past. I mean, we saw unintended consequences from the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, which was obviously introduced with generally the noblest of motives, but the actual impact of which at a time when there wasn't a consensus within Parliament, but there wasn't a supermajority to dissolve Parliament and allow for fresh elections, it did not seem to have been properly considered. So while we should be cautious about rewriting the Constitution, we cannot ignore the clear message that is being sent by petitions such as this. And as my honourable friend said, it's only weeks ago that more than 3 million people signed a petition calling for a general election, just one of a number of petitions expressing similar sentiments. And that level of public anger should concern every member, whether or not they happen to agree in this case that this government is not delivering. It should be of concern across the political spectrum that people do feel unheard and ignored. And so I would urge, as I said, those who have signed this petition and others seeking an early election to make sure that their representatives are aware of their view and encouraging them, if appropriate, to pursue that constitutional route, because governments that lose the confidence of the House have historically either resigned or sought a general election, and governments where a majority of their members have constituents who have lost confidence in the government, I don't think can continue for too long. So, Mrs. Barker, after the promises made at the last election, it is no wonder that so many of our electors feel let down, and that's why today's debate matters. It sends a clear signal from the public to Parliament, and the message is simple. People want accountability, they want honesty, they want the ability to take back that control, even where a government does have a very large majority, such as this one. But above all, I think they want competence and they want a government that delivers. This government is fast running out of road, and the sooner that the country is given the chance to choose a new direction, the better. And ahead of the next general election, we will certainly be looking at what mechanisms might be appropriate and effective to allow voters to retain control in between general elections. But we would be reluctant to rush into committing to specific mechanisms until we've had a chance to properly consider what the consequences, intended and unintended, of such mechanisms would be.
Minister Anna Turley.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Barker. It is, as always, a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Thank you so much. And I'd also like to thank the Honourable Member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk for moving this debate today, and also the Honourable Members for Chippenham and for Dumfries and Galloway for their contributions. And I'd particularly like to thank the Opposition Shadow Minister for Kingswood and South Staffordshire for his really thoughtful analysis, I thought, of some of the questions and challenges that this debate has provoked. The Honourable Member has brought this debate forward on behalf of thousands of signatories of the petition, asking for the public to be granted the right to a vote of no confidence in the government. As members here will know only too well, at the heart of our parliamentary democracy is the willingness of all our political parties to engage in debates, sometimes robustly, on the critical issues which affect our constituents' lives. And so it's important that we are here today, because although the government does not agree with the central premise of the petition being debated today, we will always respect the public's right to voice their opinions, particularly in this place, through their elected members of Parliament. And petitions debates, I think, are an important means by which to do this. Madam Chair, as ever, I'm grateful for the opportunity to respond to this debate on behalf of the government. Now, in our parliamentary democracy, the government of the day holds office by virtue of its ability to command the confidence of the House of Commons. The composition of the Commons, as we know, is decided at the general election, and this is brought about. A general election is brought about by the Prime Minister requesting the dissolution of Parliament from the Sovereign within 5 years. Now, in recent years, thanks to the instability caused by the reckless decisions of the party opposite, the public had the opportunity to decide not just in 2015, but in 2017 and again in 2019, before the last general election was held in 2024. It is, of course, quite unusual to have so many general elections in such a short space of time, and is a reflection of the previous government's chaos. And I think sometimes as a result, of course.
Giving way. For the record, is it not also important just to record that in each of those elections, with the exception of the last, the Conservative vote actually rose?
That's absolutely on the record, but the reason we had these general elections was because of the chaos and the instability that his government brought about, including the resignation, which I'll come on to talk about, of a wide number of ministers. But I think as a result of this instability, some people, particularly politicians, and I think even, dare I say, our dear friends in the media and the political commentariat, have often become addicted to the drama and instability in politics. And I'm afraid I'm sorry to disappoint them today, but, Madam Chair, we were elected to end that chaos, to return the UK to stable and secure government, and I'm proud that we are doing just that.
I'm very much looking forward to the ending of this chaos. It seems we're completely marred in it. But as a former member of the Fourth Estate, I was a journalist for a long time. I'm always very concerned when politicians blame the media. I don't think it's the media that are creating the chaos. They're simply reporting on it.
I recognise my honourable friend's distinction, and I think it's, it's absolutely right. I enjoy very much myself the role of our Fourth Estate, but I think there are many who constantly seek upheaval and drama in politics, which, for those of us who are focused on delivering for the British people, can, I think, sometimes become a bit of a distraction. And as I, as members here, know well, holding the government to account doesn't simply stop between general elections. This has never been the case. Parliament remains sovereign, and there are opportunities for ministers across the government, including the Prime Minister, to account for their actions and explain what they are doing to deliver the promise of change the public voted for in 2024. At the last general election, the Labour Party promised to take action following years of Tory chop and change, and I'm sure we all remember the collapse of Boris Johnson's government, with 43 members of that administration resigning in one day. Now, our long-standing constitutional arrangements facilitate stability, whilst balancing the need to test the confidence in the government of the day in the elected House of Commons. Altering these arrangements could risk creating a constant revolving door, the inability to achieve anything, and would cost significant cost to the public purse, given the expenses associated with administering general elections. Overall, such changes would only serve to undermine public trust in politics, create more instability and paralysis in government. I remind honourable members that our constituents already have a clear route to influence the decisions made at the highest levels of government. All of us here know our constituents are able and do make representations to us as their local constituency MPs, and we in turn champion their views in this place and make representations to ministers in government. In the event that voters signal a desire for an election, the public's voice will be channelled effectively through their local MPs across the House. Now, Madam Chair, in 2024, the public voted for change. The public voted for over 400 brilliant Labour MPs in this House. After 14 years of chaos and uncertainty, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, they voted for stability. Introducing a right for the public to have a vote of no confidence could undermine our parliamentary democracy, the duty and responsibility, indeed the primacy of this place, and could weaken the government of the day's ability to deliver its mandate. Now, those who signed this petition have said they feel the promises, and this has been referred to by honourable members in this place, they feel the promises we made to them at the last general election have not yet been delivered. Now, we all recognise that change takes time, but with every month and every pay packet that passes, I know that people will feel that change more and more. I'm extremely proud of the positive changes the Labour government has brought about since the last general election, and given the reference that's been made to manifesto pledges, I thought I'd give the honourable members opposite some good news to share with their constituents who have been questioning this about the many manifesto pledges that we have already delivered. For example, our landmark Employment Rights Act, which brings better maternity and paternity rights, an end to fire and rehire, and an end to exploitative zero-hours contracts, a manifesto promise delivered. An increase in the national minimum wage, rising to £12.71 next month, a sign that wages are up more so far under this government than under 10 years of the party opposite. A manifesto pledge delivered. The Border Security Command to crack down on criminal gangs. The manifesto promise delivered. The ending of the exemption of private school fees from VAT to enable investments that we're seeing every day in breakfast clubs so every child can start school ready to learn. A manifesto pledge delivered. The Strategic Defence Review and our plans to spend 2.5% of gross national income on defence to keep our country safe. A manifesto pledge delivered. The National Wealth Fund to support investment in our infrastructure across the country. I will.
I think the Minister begin the way. Just to be clear, can she confirm that the government will not be spending 2.5% on defence this year?
Sorry, the manifesto pledge that we are implementing. Thank you for the clarity. The National Wealth Fund to support investment in our national infrastructure across the country delivered. Great British Energy to support the delivery of clean power by 2030 and the creation of well-paid jobs in the industries of the future, delivered. Great British Railways, bringing our railways back into public ownership, rebuilding trust in this vital public service, delivered. And the delivery of more than 5 million additional NHS appointments to bring down the record high waiting lists we inherited from the previous government. This is a whole raft of our manifesto pledges that we are delivering, and alongside these pledges we're seeing 500,000 children lifted out of poverty, we're seeing breakfast clubs across the country, we're seeing wider access to free school meals for families on universal credit, uniform costs capped, prescriptions frozen, rail fares frozen and energy bills coming down. So this is a sign that we are delivering on our manifesto. There's so much more we can do and that we will deliver before the general election. Now, Madam Chair, in summary, the introduction of a vote of no confidence by the public, we fear, would undermine the stability and the effectiveness of the government of the day in delivering the manifesto commitments that I've just set out. It would also undermine the primacy of this place, the cradle of democracy, by confusing the clear lines of accountability that general elections provide. The public's right to remove and replace the government of the day is already a key part of our democratic system and is undertaken freely and fairly after a parliament is dissolved for a general election. This is the historic and sovereign democratic system of the British people. For this reason, and the other reasons I've already set out, this is why the government cannot support this petition. This Labour government is focused on delivering the change the country voted for at the last general election. We will continue to listen to the public's views and deliver, as I've demonstrated, on the promises we made to them in our manifesto to end the 14 years of chaos and decline and to build a better Britain.
John Lamont to wind up.
Mrs Barker. I hadn't anticipated having an hour to fill for my... but I joke, I'm not going to fill the hour. Can I thank the petitioner for creating this petition and all the people who have signed it, and to the honourable and right honourable members who have participated in today's debate. It's been an example of quality over quantity, I feel. I particularly enjoyed the Minister's speech, I have to say. I do feel that she's living in a bit of a parallel universe in terms of the chaos, division and uncertainty which apparently this government is moving on from. I think for most of us in the real world, our perception is somewhat different. The Minister made much of the 14 years of Conservative rule. I mean, it's useful to remember, though, in those 14 years, and she mentioned the many elections that took place in that 14-year period, the 5 general elections that took place in the 14 years of Conservative rule, in 4 of them, the Conservative vote went up and more people were voting Conservative and more people had Conservative MPs as a consequence. It wasn't entirely all bad. Now, this debate, this petition, I think is less about the constitutional change that was being proposed, but more the feeling that many people have of feeling let down and betrayed by this government, the sense of promises being broken, promises not being delivered, and a real sense of lack of direction. I think we all heard the Minister's account of all the things that have been achieved, apparently, during the time of Labour's time in office. But in many ways, that's part of the problem, this feeling that the government feels people should be grateful. People should feel that they're feeling better. But the reality out there in the real world is they don't feel any better. They feel things are getting worse. Unemployment is up, debt's going up, people are waiting longer for NHS appointments. People feel very let down. And I think this debate has been an opportunity to reflect on that. And I hope the petitioner and everybody who's been watching this debate has had the opportunity to listen to both sides of that debate. Thank you, Mrs Barker.
The question is that this House has considered E-petition 734311 relating to the public being given a right to a vote of no confidence. As many are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. This sitting is now suspended until 6 p.m.